So about a year ago, in April of 2017, I put together a Discord group for fans of my podcast. It came from the internet. It was immediately a lot more popular than I thought it was going to be. We got a fair amount of people who came in, and a lot of those people are still in the modern incarnation of the Discord, and I would consider most of them pretty good friends. Except for one. And that one is Caesar. Caesar is a man who has been a thorn in my side and the sides of everyone in my circle of friends for the last year and a half, because he has hounded us with his problems, his drama, and his asshole almost non-stop. And it has gotten to the point that anytime someone new joins the Discord, we all sort of crowd together and tell them the ballad of Caesar. But that's gotten kind of tiresome, and it usually takes a long time. So what I'm starting here is a series of videos about the lore, for lack of a better term, of the Discord, in the hopes that people who do join up don't have to get told these stories a dozen times over a dozen weeks. They can just come here and listen to these and get it over with pretty quickly, as well as hopefully to attract some more people to the group. So if you like what you hear here, or if you'd like to meet any of the players in person, there will be a link to the Discord in the comment section in the video description as well. Without further ado, I'm just sort of going to plunge here into the saga of Caesar and regale you with who is, in no uncertain terms, the worst fucking person I've ever met in my life. So as I previously said, I first met Caesar in April of 2017, when I opened the Discord. There were about a dozen people who joined up pretty quick, and Caesar was one of them, but most people just sort of talked in text. Caesar left a strong impression on me because Caesar was there for the Discord's first real voice chat. Now at this point, I had already been part of some other Discord groups where we would do voice chat almost every day, so this came very natural to me, but a lot of people weren't really up for it at first. So the first real voice chat was me, a user named Aquanaz, which if you use the Kiwi Farms website, you will recognize that name because he's the fucking worst person there, and Caesar. This first chat was overall pretty pleasant, but it was largely controlled by Caesar. Now that's not necessarily a negative. Over the next few weeks, we would sort of find that most of the people who were in the Discord tended to be kind of reclusive, kind of secondary, kind of shy, and Caesar would never shut the fuck up, which was a positive, really. That meant that the flow of conversation never stopped. It kept going. And he wasn't necessarily an unpleasant person to talk to. His microphone was weirdly clear. He was eloquent. He could speak properly. And while he would just sort of ramble on in his own little head, that wasn't necessarily the worst thing to be doing in a Discord chat. It helped to smooth over the sort of meeting and greeting process that the Discord has to go through in the first couple weeks. Now, in the first chat, Caesar decided to spend most of it telling us about his ideas for a second season of the anime Panty and Stocking and Garter Belt. Namely, he wanted the season to focus on hyperviolence, and he wanted it to be scored entirely by mindless self-indulgence. An extremely weird topic to use as an icebreaker, but damn if it didn't work. Caesar almost immediately fell under ridicule from me and Aquanaz, but it was largely light jabbing. We didn't necessarily rip into him too hard about this, because we didn't want to scare him off. I especially wanted to foster this community, and Aquanaz just seemed to enjoy the act of talking to people. You got the impression that Aquanaz really didn't get out a whole lot. So, at first, Caesar was a pretty positive influence on the Discord, but that wouldn't last very long. The first moment that we sort of realized Caesar maybe wasn't going to be a good member of the community was when we were discussing the skeptic communities. And again, this is April of 2017. We were ahead of the fucking curve. we had just sort of been discussing various people, and one of those was Armored Skeptic and his girlfriend Shoeonhead. And while we were mostly critical about their output, because they suck, Caesar chimed in with the little nugget of, wouldn't it be funny if we tied down Shoeonhead in a basement and forced her to blow us? It wouldn't have been, Caesar. It would not have been funny. That's not a joke. That's just a mean thing to think about someone, you fucking weirdo. If you run in the circles that I run in, that type of humor is not necessarily uncommon. The delivery Caesar provided that joke with seemed a little too genuine, but we all kind of assumed that he was just making a really crude, dark joke for the sake of it. So we really didn't think about it too much. Although we brought it up a few more times, and it did seem kind of dark for the caliber of... It seemed pretty dark, considering we didn't really know each other super well. But again, we kind of let it slide, which we really shouldn't have. Now, I have a pretty long list of events that happened to Caesar, but I don't know their exact dates, only that they take place before August of 2017, so I'm just sort of going to roll through them. As we got to know Caesar, Caesar started to reveal things about his home life. Caesar had a mother and a father, but his father, and they were separated, and his father was estranged. His mother had a boyfriend who was Honduran, I think? I don't really remember. But Caesar had a lot of problems with his stepdad in particular. I related to that. I had a lot of problems with my stepdad growing up, and problems I really didn't resolve until recently. So I felt for Caesar in his plight. The Discord was mainly made up of mid-20s to early 20s people, but Caesar was a little younger. He was 18 when he joined the group. And I think a lot of us felt like we could sort of help Caesar along his life path a little smoother than any of us had ran it. A lot of us sort of got the feeling a lot of people in the Discord had hit rough patches in their lives with various things. And I feel like we all kind of wanted Caesar to do a little better. So we were receptive to his problems. Some of the other weird tidbits Caesar revealed to us was that his sister was older than him, and he actually lived with her. She was a nurse, I believe. She was married, and she had a daughter who you could hear a lot of the time in the background of Caesar's voice chat, which would get a little weird sometimes because Caesar could get very dark. He also revealed to us, for some reason, he didn't have a bed, but a pile of blankets that he slept on. This was particularly weird because Caesar had internet access and a television and an Xbox and all this other shit. So it was weird that he didn't have a bed or even really a couch to sit on. One really weird night, Caesar tells us that there is some sort of worm creature writhing around on his floor, some sort of flatworm. And he spends most of the night telling us about his attempts to figure out what it is. He seemed to be pretty certain it was some kind of snake, but the rest of us were almost completely sure it was just some sort of flatworm. It really didn't make any sense for it to be a snake if it's flat. It also didn't seem to be very big. But it took about 5 or 6 hours for him to finally shut up about the worm. We all kind of forget about that. I hadn't really thought about it until I started putting this stuff together for this video. But that was an extremely surreal experience, and one that I really feel like we should have talked more about, but I digress. One night, Caesar gets on voice chat, and he informs us that his stepfather is on a drunken rampage, and immediately we were all a little spooked, because we thought like, oh no, is Caesar going to get beat up on voice chat? Are we going to lose contact with him? Because it didn't seem like he was getting much in the way of emotional support anywhere else in his life. But his stepfather just seemed to be ransacking the place, and it never really felt like Caesar was in direct trouble. In the background, you could hear his stepfather making what can only really be described as Frankenstein noises. Just sort of mumbling to himself while you heard things crashing around. It didn't even seem like he was doing a particularly good job of wrecking the place, just that he was trying to, and but he didn't have the motor function to pull it off successfully. Again, we just sort of glossed over that bit in the Discord. I feel like we should have talked about that a little more. But something we talked about all the time was Caesar's fledgling sexuality. Pretty early on, Caesar began to confide in us that he believed he may be homosexual. Most of the Discord was supportive in this. We didn't really care all that much what Caesar was, as long as he was a good person and happy. And later on, we would find out that he wasn't either of those things, and he probably shouldn't be one of those things, ever. But we'll get to that. We didn't really mind or care that he was gay. We got the impression that his family would probably be pretty upset about it, but we didn't, and we were fine with it. Caesar seemed to take this as a meaning that he was doing something right in his life by being gay, and he started to really double down on this. Later on, in less than a month's span, Caesar revealed that he believed he was transsexual. Again, the Discord was largely supportive about this, although we were a little more hesitant to believe his self-diagnosis. That's kind of a real problem today, is people say they're trans, but they don't bother to get diagnosed by a physician. And then they sort of co-opt that community to seem more unique than they are. But again, for the most part, we didn't really care. That was kind of the resounding thing we wanted to make clear to Caesar. We did not care. He seemed to take that as meaning that we enjoyed that he was gay, that he was transsexual. And that's where things started to get bad. One user took a video game character and made like a little avatar for Caesar out of it. A character that is transsexual, just sort of as like it's like a half joke, but kind of like a half sign of solidarity, I guess. And Caesar decided that meant that person wanted to have sex with him, and he hounded them pretty relentlessly for a month and a half before they finally told him to fuck off and stop. That would more or less continue for the next few months. Caesar will just sort of pop into voice chat and he will start telling us about his problems. Whether that's problems with dating, or whether that's problems with hormones that he wasn't taking but that he was looking into taking. Whether it was problems with his family, whether it was problems with his life, whether it was problems with his mental health, whether it was problems with his physical health. Things that we really weren't equipped to talk about. Things that you and your friends may talk about every once in a while, but things that you don't talk about constantly. And Caesar talked about it constantly. It's really hard to pound home just how much Caesar talked about this. Almost every night, I would come home from work at around 10:30, and I would get on voice chat, and I would usually be on voice chat until 1 or 2 in the morning. For nearly that entire time, Caesar was there, and at least once every 10 minutes, Caesar would try to shift the conversation back onto himself. Caesar wouldn't follow the flow of the conversation, he would try to direct it, and that got extremely aggravating if you and someone else were trying to have a real conversation. Now, admittedly, at this time, we were just sort of getting to know each other in a lot of ways, so there really wasn't that much to talk about. We didn't really have anything super exciting to talk about, and usually when we did have something we were all interested in, Caesar usually just wasn't there, or he wasn't paying a whole lot of attention. But that changed in August, when, of all things, Sonic Mania came out. I and another user had both gotten Sonic Mania, and we both liked it. It was a popular game, and it was a fun game, and we were trying to talk about it. And Caesar wanted to talk about his asshole again, or he wanted to talk about his life problems, and we both just kind of shut him down really hard. We got really upset with him because we didn't want to talk about him. We wanted to talk about this thing that we were having fun with. We wanted to have a good time. We didn't want Caesar to bring us back down with his fucking stepdad and his fat nurse sister and his myriad of health problems. It just wasn't what we were there for. Caesar smartened up a little bit, but it wasn't that long before he started to fall back down again. He would just sort of say things that made people uncomfortable. People in the Discord would get together and they would watch anime and shit. And one of the ones that they would watch was called Ranma One Half. If you don't know what that's about, it's about a boy who gets cursed by a pool of water. So anytime he's in cold water, he turns into a woman. Anytime he's in hot water, he turns into a man, or vice versa. And at one point, Caesar said he wanted to dip another user halfway into the Ranma pool, so that way they would be half man and half woman. Which prompted that particular user got extremely uncomfortable, and the rest of us ragged on Caesar extremely hard about it because of what a weird thing it was to say. Even now, we still occasionally talk about the Ranma pool whenever someone talks about doing something particularly fucked up. Another night that I was not there for, but has been verified by several different people, including Caesar. Caesar had gotten a little tipsy, and he had suddenly revealed to the other people in voice chat that he was, quote, pitching a tent. One user, like a warm father figure, sort of uncomfortable, goes like, well, Caesar, I guess, that's natural, just sort of keep it to yourself. And then Caesar immediately says, in this very high-pitched, small voice, and I'm rubbing it. Caesar also revealed that he wanted various members in the Discord to be in his harem, and that he wanted to be in the middle of an MMF. And I'll leave you to ask your parents what that means, kiddos. God. We got a small reprieve from Caesar in September because Hurricane Irma blew through, and Caesar and his family left the state to go up to Philadelphia, I believe, in order to ride the hurricane out. We still heard from Caesar occasionally, but thankfully we really didn't hear from him nearly as much as we had before. He really did sort of stay on his own turf at that time, which is probably for the best. He may have realized that he was overstepping his bounds and now needed space, or else he was going to be kicked from the group entirely, which quite a few people wanted to do. More than one user wanted to just ban Caesar and be done with it. But I, in particular, did not want that to happen. I felt like Caesar was just a confused young man, and I wanted to sort of help him find a better path in his life. Something that I never got, that I just sort of lucked into finding a pretty okay path on. Big mistake. When Caesar does return, he returns with he gets back a little bit of clout with the Discord group by exposing another user in the Discord by the name of Blake. You probably know him as Bombastic Blake of Blake Diamond Productions, Patreon link in the description below. Blake, who was married at the time, had been flirting with Caesar, and almost... It's hard to tell how serious he was about this, but he was flirting with Caesar and seemingly trying to set up a meet between them while he was married to have sex with him. Now again, Caesar is 18 at this point, so he's legal. But mentally, Caesar was never quite there. You always got the impression that Caesar had a low-level learning disability, and it had really set him back a few years because no one bothered to try and teach him around it, or no one tried to get him better lessons that he could better understand. He just sort of seemed to be left behind and just scraped by fast enough that the school system just sort of sent him on his way. So it was extra creepy for Blake to be more or less preying on a younger dude. Blake's in his mid-20s at least. Caesar joined in on the fray of sort of taking down Blake for that, and it earned him a few good boy points with the Discord. But he would, of course, fuck that up too. Now, for these next few bits, it's important to understand that not everything I'm putting here is necessarily malicious or evil. A lot of it's just annoying or funny. We will get into some of the more malicious shit later on, but just to know that I'm not saying everything Caesar has done here is his fault or wrong. It was not Caesar's fault that an older dude tried to fuck him, and it was not wrong or bad for Caesar to come out as transsexual. Those are his problems. It was just annoying that he would constantly hound us with it. And these next few things are not really wrong in any capacity, but they're really fucking funny, so I'm going to talk about them. In October of 2017, we found out Caesar had joined the Discord of a porn artist named Anna Shea. Anna Shea specializes in images of women with dicks having sex with young men. Anna Shea's Discord had a role-playing server that was populated solely by Caesar and one or two people who just sort of would chime in and then let him go. Caesar's role-playing is amazing. Caesar takes on the form of a young woman who goes to a wizard for some reason, and then gets possessed by an ancient demon and becomes a lamia, which is a snake woman, and then grows a dick, and then lactates wine from her breast and mead out of her vagina that she apparently still has, and then lays a bunch of eggs, and then the eggs hatch, and one of the eggs hatches out a black duck that has a knife for some reason, and then she starts humming the theme from the Devilman anime to one of the baby chicks, and then it just sort of tapered out from there. There really wasn't a whole lot left there. I think at that point we chimed in and Caesar sort of turned tail and ran. Caesar got extremely defensive about this act. Whenever he would get defensive in weird ways too. Like when I'd say, Caesar, why is it that you produce wine from your nipples but mead from your vagina? And Caesar would say, that's not true, I only produce mead from both. As if that was less weird, and also as if that was the point. We were making fun of him, and he just sort of ran with it. He got extremely angry. He wasn't merely embarrassed, he was angry and spiteful to us. He would start to distance himself a little bit from us, because while he had been banned for short periods of times, we always brought Caesar back in the hopes that he would learn a lesson. Here, Caesar left of his own accord. But when Caesar did return, he returned with news. Caesar had found a man on Craigslist. He had met up with him. They had had sex, and then the two of them had gone out for Taco Bell afterwards. Now, a couple things to understand here. One, yes, Caesar was the catcher, not the pitcher. Two, the man was married. He was significantly older than Caesar. And after this, they never spoke again. And three, it was not established beforehand that Taco Bell would be awarded after the act. But within the confines of the Discord, it very quickly became the running joke that Caesar had sold his virginity for Taco Bell. And that's really funny. And if you don't think that's funny, you're not my nigga, and I don't want to talk to you ever again. Please leave. So Caesar fluctuates. He comes back into the Discord, we hound on him, and he inevitably leaves. Or he just sort of sticks around and takes it like a coward. Or like a weird masochist. But by the end of the year, Caesar would do a massive 180. He seemed to have realized that if his initial tactic of really doubling down on homosexuality didn't work, then the opposite tactic must work. Caesar became very right-wing. He became very racial. And then finally racist, which is extremely weird because I'm pretty positive at some point Caesar tried to date a black man. But I digress. Caesar would spend his time in the voice chat trying to tell us not about the hard science of race realism that doesn't exist, but more his weird, half-baked poll memes. None of which we really cared about. Most people in the Discord treated this no differently than the gay stuff, that it was just annoying and stupid. But I personally got really aggravated with Caesar during this time, because I felt like he had gone from just an idiot kid who overstepped his bounds into really malicious territory. I had been a big defender for Caesar for a long time, and it was very aggravating to see him then turn around into such a dark creature, for lack of a better term. Caesar's positions just sort of got bigger with the rise of the right wing on YouTube. Groups like Internet Blood Sports, Morning Kumite, the type of dudes who sort of build themselves up as enemies of the leftists and enemies of the liberals, but play really coy about where on the political spectrum they lie. Caesar ate that shit up. And a lot of people on the Discord did, because that was a ton of internet drama, and it's always really fun. But most of us didn't care about the politics stuff, and most of us found the politics really annoying. Caesar found the politics ingratiating, and it got really aggravating when he would constantly bring them back up. Basically, from the end of 2017 up until now, that's who Caesar is. He hasn't really changed at all. He's sort of pretty consistently remained this bizarre pseudo-racist. Not pseudo-racist, this bizarre low-level racist. He doesn't seem to have a reason to hate people of different races, but he does so in such a shameless way. And he really hasn't stopped being annoying. One night, a bunch of users in the voice chat changed their usernames to make fun of Caesar, and Caesar threatened to kill himself. And as proof, he showed us a video of him with a knife to his stomach that he was presumably planning to eviscerate himself with. Not a very efficient way to kill yourself. And then he would get just more and more militant. A few times he told people he was going to join the French Foreign Legion for some reason, and that he was amassing machine guns for the forthcoming civil war. Caesar seemed really enamored with the concepts of masculinity, but he himself never expunged. He himself was such a submissive person. He really didn't have a right to pretend to be that super macho tough dude, because he wasn't. He didn't have a job. He didn't have any real education. He didn't have any responsibilities. He just wanted to pretend he did, because he thought it would make him more liked, but it didn't. And at some point, when he realized that, like a cockroach or an STD, you really couldn't get rid of him, he just sort of stopped ever trying to change. Because he realized that no matter what he did, he was eventually going to get back. He just got increasingly angry and cruel to various users. One time, there's a user who wanted to be a cop, and he would tell them very viciously that there was no way they could ever be a cop, that they were too shitty, that they were too fat, they weren't good enough. One time he demanded another user kill their dog for some reason. These comments are cruel and mean-spirited, but by this point we'd become so numb to it, we really didn't care. We just sort of used it as another opportunity to shit on Caesar, because once again, Caesar just sort of kept the flow of conversation going. There wasn't much downtime when Caesar was around, because if you didn't have anything to say, you could bet Caesar would say something stupid and give you the opportunity to say something mean to him. He also got really into the occult at some point, in sort of the same way David Bowie did, where it doesn't really matter, and he talks about it a whole lot, but he doesn't make it a central part of his life. And he's stupid, so who cares? Anyway. To sort of round this out, to sort of show you what a malicious and petty person Caesar is, at the start of this summer, another user prompted some people in the Discord to start up a game of Dungeons and Dragons. He had a night job where he was sort of left to his own devices, so he could sort of do it through Discord. A couple different people signed on, including me and Caesar. Now, Caesar was particularly spiteful towards me because I had gotten so vicious with him about his racism. So he spent almost every moment he could in the game of Dungeons and Dragons trying to get his character to hurt my character, even though that's not how the game's supposed to be played, and even though it ruined the game and it made it way harder for anyone to do anything fun. Caesar used the board game as a means to get back at me, as if that mattered. All he really did was make the game miserable and not very fun to play. And that's generally what Caesar does. Every once in a while, Caesar will say or do something that sounds extremely funny, that sounds extremely stupid, that sounds entertaining. But for the most part, he just drags down the conversation. He's a shitty person. He's not a fun guy to be around. And even trying to condense what a bad, shitty person he is has taken me nearly half an hour. So fuck you, Caesar. You're the worst. That's it. I'm not going to try very hard to edit this, because I'm actually more aggravated now than I was when I started this. I hate you, Caesar. And you're permanently banned from this point forward.